Thank you, Dr. Pietro, and thank you, Alison. Good morning, everyone. It's great that we still have a large number of attendees today, day 2, and it's exciting that we're interacting with the HDP Nexus at this level. I'm very happy to hear the feedback and the recap, some of the comments that we got from the participants in terms of what we learned yesterday and some of the things that stood out to us. Unfortunately, we weren't able to take the activity yesterday, but I hope that towards the end of the conversation today, we'll be able to integrate some of those key aspects and go into a bit of plenary and discuss some of the outstanding things from yesterday. But it's great that we're getting comfortable with the idea of the HDP Nexus, and I'm hoping that we can start to see the areas for application and operationalization within our clubs and even within the work that we do outside of Rotary. So today's conversation is going to center on one of the key pillars of the HDP Nexus. Yesterday when we were talking, I had mentioned that you're going to be hearing collective outcomes at least 10 times in 10 minutes. And today is going to be that day where we're discussing collective outcomes from pretty much the beginning of the training down to the end of it. Before we get into that, I just want to do a very quick recap of the HDP Nexus. As we know, it essentially is an approach or an integrated approach towards addressing problems and solving needs and ensuring that you are addressing the core issues on the ground. And I know that in some of the programming that we do within our clubs and our districts and some of the projects that we step out to do, we are looking to do better. We are looking to integrate and we're looking to have more impact. I always like to emphasize that the HDP is not asking you to do away with the knowledge that you currently have. We only want to augment the way you do things and help you to achieve more impact. So everything you've known before stepping into this training is very much valid. The question is, how do we augment that and how do we emphasize collaboration, partnership, and coordination in all of the activities that we will be doing moving forward? So that's just on a note to recap the importance of the HDP Nexus and what we're trying to achieve before we go into the conversation of collective outcomes. I'd just like to do a quick poll. Would anybody try to take a guess as to what collective outcomes are? Everybody but Dr. Pietro, he pretty much knows what collective outcomes are. But would anybody try to take a guess as to when you hear collective outcomes, what comes to mind? Maybe one or two people. Let's check the chat.
Please, ma, feel free to invite one or two persons on the spot. That helps with Rotarians' attentiveness.
Okay. Thank you for that, Dr. Pietro. Okay, so maybe I'll use that in the next question I have, but I'll just take it that collective outcomes are, or the phrase collective outcome is something that is entirely new to us in the work that we do, and I'll do my best to break it down as we go forward. As I had shared yesterday, collective outcomes are the meat of the HDP Nexus. The HDP does not exist outside of collective outcomes, and collective outcomes cannot exist without the HDPN. So I'd like us to please have our full attention on this. Once we grasp collective outcomes, we're able to operationalize and implement the HDP in any setting that we find ourselves. Okay, so I've gotten a bit of comments in the chat. Thank you very much, Juliet, and thank you, Adeoye. Apologies for that. And so collective outcomes are the result of teamwork or resolutions reached. Yes, pretty much. So as it sounds, or as it would paint a meaning in your mind, collective outcomes essentially point to a joint venture or a jointly envisioned result to help address the risks, needs, and vulnerabilities that exist within a particular area or a particular context or a particular community. And this is where we now combine the efforts of humanitarian, development, and peace actors where it's necessary and appropriate. So think of collective outcomes as you've done a needs assessment within a particular area, coming back to area-based approach. You've figured out that there are these number of issues that span humanitarian, development, and peace challenges. And you now want to work towards proffering a solution of bringing about a project that addresses these issues. The collective outcome there would be the result that each of these different actors or each of the different stakeholders is working towards at the end of the day that helps solve the challenges within the context of that community or the area that they are programming for. So I'll give an example. Let's say maybe Mubi in Adamawa State. So you go into Mubi and you discover that there is lack of access to education for possibly primary age school children. You notice that there are challenges around certain infrastructure that would help. Maybe there's no public market, there is no space for buying and selling. You also notice that there's conflict as to how certain resources are shared within the community. You notice that there are also other development challenges and also maybe other additional peace challenges on ground. And you have several ideas or you have several approaches that you want to use to solve these issues. Your collective outcome in that instance would be all of these issues. What do we jointly envision at the end of the day as being the outcome or the solution that we prefer? Essentially, it is to be context specific, again, looking at the area that you find yourself and the needs on the ground. It should engage comparative advantage, which we talked about yesterday. Essentially, what is your strength? What are you good at? And what are you essentially an expert in within your field to be able to program for that situation? And of course, drawing on the multi-year framework. So I just want to speak very quickly to comparative advantage. One of the reasons why the HDP Nexus emphasizes comparative advantage is because a lot of times you find different actors trying to do everything. Maybe there's a local NGO that programs across all the different sectors. That's stretching the organization and its resources very thin, if you would agree with me. You might find that, oh, you're doing gender-based violence, you're doing education, you're doing WASH, you're doing you're doing health, so many things at once. And that now creates a situation where you are not an expert in anything, but you're trying to program and access funding for everything that is available. Whereas if we focus on comparative advantage, that's taking into cognizance or into account what your expertise is and what you've been programming for over the past couple of years, what you have sufficient capacity around, especially within your team. Maybe there are people who can program around certain things and you've been working with them for a period of time. You would focus on that particular thing. So for example, education. You have people with over 15 years of experience in education on your team. Instead of focusing on all the challenges that Mubi has, your responsibility in that instance would be to take the education component and focus on it, because that is where your comparative advantage lies. And comparative advantage extends to so many other things. Some organizations or some groups are good with data collection and data analysis. Some groups are better with stakeholder management or mapping and interfacing with key stakeholders that can drive a particular process. And some people are good with coordinating the entire project. So we look at comparative advantage as essentially, what are you good at? What do you have experience doing? And if we were to ask you, what would you focus on in this situation? what would be the first answer that comes to mind? So that's comparative advantage. And we encourage that with organizations, individuals, and any groups wanting to do work around development, peace building, and humanitarian intervention, that it is better to focus on what you know best and what you can do best rather than try to do everything. My favorite phrase for this is you cannot do everything and you should not do everything. It's impossible to solve all of the problems. But if you focus on the problems from the angle of what you are able to achieve and what you can achieve most, it's easier to solve for these communities or for the individuals that we program for. Essentially, using this area-based approach or context specificity, comparative advantage, and the multi-year framework would then allow you to arrive at a collective outcome that ultimately addresses the issue on ground. So instead of going into a community because you have a health, you have strength in health, you want to do something for a community around health, so you just go in and you distribute medical items, you do a day of medical outreach and you go away. And at the end of the day, that is not the only thing that the community needs. Your intervention is not integrated, your intervention is not holistic. So at the end of the day, you've only put a band-aid on the issue rather than addressing the problems or the pain points that the people in the community have. So instead of doing what you can only do, you now collaborate with others based on their comparative advantage and yours, and go into this community and look at the ultimate outcome at the end of the day. What are we trying to achieve for them? So I'm going to walk us through how collective outcomes come about and show us how a collective outcome statement essentially is phrased at the end of the day. But just keep in mind that it is a jointly envisioned result that addresses the needs, risks, and vulnerabilities of a community or a context or a space. And it builds on the tenets of the HDP Nexus, which is context specificity or area-based approach, engaging comparative advantage, and building on a multi-year framework. And just a very quick question to everyone out there. Who remembers what the minimum number of years for HDPN is?
3 years.
3 years. Thank you very much. So we would judge your collective outcome or your HDPN project around the multi-year framework of a minimum of 3 years. So you might be wondering, how do you ultimately formulate or program for collective outcomes in the work that you do? How do you go about achieving a collective outcome? First of all, and I made this comment a bit earlier, we've all been doing work around humanitarian intervention, we've been supporting development, we've been doing peace building, peacemaking, or peacekeeping activities. And what we've been doing is not wrong, it is effective to a degree. But in understanding what the HDPN is advocating for, how do we now go about achieving a holistic or integrated approach to solving the problems that we meet on the ground? The first is you need to determine what the best entry point for HDPN planning and collective outcomes is. Is it for an existing project that you have on the ground? Or is it for a project that you're envisaging to start in the near future? Is it easy to program or integrate HDP into what you're already doing? Or do you need to go back to the drawing board with your team and decide that, okay, moving forward with this new knowledge that we have, with this new information under our belt, how do we now go about doing the work that we've been doing? So you need to first determine what is the best entry point for HDPN or collective outcomes. The next is to determine if the collective support that has been taken up to date is achieving the expected impact or result. And what this means here is a lot of times, and I did hear us speak about adopted communities yesterday, it is very unlikely that your club or a particular organization or anybody looking to do good or support within a community is the first person trying to do that within the context of that community. You might find that, or maybe there has been international donor presence in the past, other NGOs are possibly programming and working in that area, or even your organization or your club has been doing something in that space before now. You need to determine what has happened before and what has it achieved, what is the result it has achieved at this point. In doing that, you're first understanding the context that you find yourself. You're also going to be able to understand if the approach that has been used in the past is working or if it needs to be modified entirely. It also gives you an idea of who is doing what within the space and where there are certain gaps that need to be filled. So it's essentially, knowing what has happened before so that you can know what needs to be done next. So it's very important to understand or determine what has happened in the past, whether any action, any project, any program has taken any shape or form or birthed a particular result or impact in line with what you're trying to achieve, or in the context of humanitarian development and peace building support. The next is to determine the host government's willingness to either lead or participate in the HDPN process. And this is critical for us because on one hand, it is the mandate of the government to drive development. And if you are not working hand in hand or collaborating with governments, eventually they can make it difficult for you to do your work. There have been so many situations. So I work primarily in the Northeast, and you go into a community and you want to do something, and the local government chairman or the governor or whoever sits at the helm of affairs tells you, I don't want this project here, and you cannot do anything about it. This is also where we talk about inclusivity in our planning, in our programming, and in our execution/implementation of the work that we do. The government is a key part of development, and leaving them outside of our plans, first of all, it spoils your chances of sustainability because the government has the structures, they often have the funding, and they have the systems that would help you sustain whatever intervention that you are doing. And if you're not involving them in the process, it's very unlikely that they might either let you continue or your intervention has a system to fall back on when you exit or when your project comes to an end. We like to remind everybody who wants to support as a humanitarian or support with charity or through the work that they do, is that one of the things we like to remind is that the work of humanitarians is only to support or assist the government and not to replace services that they're expected to provide. While they cannot do everything, it's important for us to also remember the limitations that bind us as humanitarian actors, as peace-building actors. We cannot work outside of the confines of the government. So it's very important to determine whether they are going to be willing to lead or participate in the process. And because of context, a lot of times, government is expected to lead on certain things. I'll talk a bit more about that as we progress in the training. The next is to then identify the enablers and barriers that help you to address the crisis within the context that you find yourself. So that could also be in terms of what are the missing capacities on ground, or what are the missing resources that the HDP community can either leverage or take advantage of. So here, I'd just like to paint a quick scenario. So imagine going into a community and you want to do an intervention, maybe for a women-focused intervention, and you find that you have to go through the usual channels of maybe community leaders, women leaders, and all of that. And one person within the group stands up and says, if you don't do this for me or so and so people, we will not allow you to do the work that you are doing. I'm sure that more often than not, we might have encountered this in one form or the other. They're essentially people or structures within the context that we work in that might prevent us from doing the work that we do. And in the same vein, there are also individual structures, systems, and processes that we can even leverage that would enable us to do the work that we need to do. But if we do not know what they are, it's very difficult to leverage them or take advantage of them. Again, back to the example of the community where somebody says, I won't let you do this work. On the flip side, you can have some young people in a community who, if you gather them and tell them, oh, we want to train youths on this, this, and this, they would support you, they would mobilize, they will gather, they will give you all the resources and information that you need to do your project without you having to stress about it. We would think of those people as enablers in this situation. On the other side, it's also possible to have barriers, and barriers can come in any form. They could be community leaders, they could be existing cultural practices within the context that we're intending to work in, or it could be anything at all. But if we do not know what they are, we're not able to understand how they can either work in our favor or how we need to program around some of those issues. And finally, it is also important to determine whether there is adequate capacity to formulate and implement collective outcomes at a reasonable pace. So we're using at a reasonable pace for this singular reason. Development is not something that can be rushed. Peace is not something that can be rushed. If we're not intentional about it and following the steps and the processes as they come, it's very easy for us to find ourselves back at ground zero. So do we have the adequate capacity to first formulate and implement collective outcomes? And this could be around, do you have key personnel that can support you to do this work? Do you have the right contacts, stakeholders, network that you can leverage to do this work? Do you have the right information about the community? Do you understand the enabling factors and barriers within the context that you intend to work in? Understanding all of this would also lead to the capacity to lead to your capacity to be able to formulate and implement at a reasonable pace. So there are 5 steps to formulate and program for collective outcomes. And the first step is to form a thematic outcome group with representation from each of the pillars. So the pillars here would be the humanitarian, development, and peace building pillars. Here is where you essentially carry out your joint analysis. And although we'll be talking about joint analysis a bit further down in the training, joint analysis essentially helps you understand what is on ground. The mistake that is usually made is there's a call for applications, or one person has a particular feeling or a sentiment, or you've heard from just one person in a community, or our issue here is we don't have water, and you just want to program around that. Do you have the data to back up the issues that you are finding on the ground? Now, this could be by either going yourself to do primary data gathering activities, or even doing a desk review of what is currently attainable. But it is important to carry out joint analysis with representation from each of the pillars. In that way, each of these pillars, representatives from these pillars, give you perspective or give you an understanding of what is achievable or even feasible within the context of that community. But if you're not working together, collaborating from the onset, it's difficult to now start to bring everybody into the process later on. So joint analysis is the first step, and you need to have a thematic outcome group with representation from these pillars as you go. So the thematics or the theme here will be maybe around the 8 themes for Rotary, or even for some of the issues that you find on the ground. Now, you also need to agree on the timeline to determine this collective outcome. So the beautiful thing with collective outcomes is it is time-bound. It is entirely time-bound. You're coming from point A in 2025, and by 2028, you need to determine if you've been able to reach point B, C, or if you are now behind point A. So there needs to be an agreed upon timeline to be able to say that, yes, this collective outcome was either achieved or was achieved to a certain degree. at the stage that we now go on to assign responsibilities based on the comparative advantage of the thematic outcome group that you have, who is going to be responsible for research, ensuring that we're getting data from the community, who is responsible for verifying this, who is responsible for bringing in the critical stakeholders that we need. All of these questions and all of these responsibilities need to be answered and assigned from the very onset. One of the questions we usually get, so is it possible for more than one person to lead when you have a thematic outcome group? And yes, it is. If you lead based on your comparative advantage, there would never be a question about who is expected to lead this process, who is good at what, and how can you use that to the advantage of the larger group. The next is to develop SMART collective outcomes, and SMART would fall back to the acronym for specific, measurable, achievable or attainable, realistic or relevant, and timely or time-bound. So going to the S part of the SMART rubric, and this is the SMART criteria is what we use to judge if a collective outcome falls in place with what we're doing with the HDP Nexus. Talking about specificity, it cuts across what is the specific area that you are trying to program or intervene for and who. What is the specific thing that you want to do? So without giving it away, because I'd like us to actually go back and formulate collective outcomes. But a lot of times you say you want to do a particular thing. Meanwhile, you're not very specific. And so the meaning or the intention of what you're trying to achieve is lost. We harp on specificity within the HDP Nexus because we want to know exactly what it is we want to achieve. So for example, maybe let's go back to movie. The situation in movie is that they're out of school children in terms of education. What do you want to do in that instance? Some people might say, oh, we want to send all the children back to school. That's a noble and that's a great thing. But specifically, how do you intend to achieve that? Specificity speaks to that. Measurable. This is the thing with numbers. If, again, in movie, you have 1,000 out of school children, and your goal is to send everybody back to school. Ideally, your collective outcome will reflect that you want to return 1,000 children, 1,000 out of school children back to school. We need to be able to measure it so that we know all the points you are coming from and where it is you are trying to reach at the end of your programming timeline. The next is achievable or attainable. Let's go back to the example of the out of school children. Is it really achievable or possible or attainable to send all 1,000 children back to school? While it is a noble goal, can we be realistic? Let's merge the A and R. Realistically, in terms of achieving it, is it possible to do this? We need to be honest with ourselves. One of the silent things about the HDP is it emphasizes honesty. We need to be very honest with ourselves. When we come from a place of honesty, it helps us to actually achieve the goals that we have set in front of us. Is it realistic? Is it possible? Is it achievable in the context that we find ourselves? I would think if you have 1,000 children out of school in a particular area, you might be able to achieve 80% of getting achieve about 80% going back to school. 100% is almost, if not impossible. I'm happy to be corrected on that, but we need to look at how realistic this plan or this intention or this proposal or this project is. And finally, time bound. We need to know what point this intervention is starting, when it's ending, to enable us to measure and understand if impact has actually been achieved or the goals of the project have been achieved. And this points to just ensuring that when you look at your specific outcomes, you are also accommodating and engaging the different key, relevant, or multiple actors within the space. Sorry, I'm seeing a bit of comments in the chat. Let me just quickly check in case there's something to point out from there. And thank you so much, Spencer Green, Benga, Ochania. Thank you so much for the comments on collective outcome as well. Great. So these are the first two steps, forming your thematic outcome groups and to carry out your joint analysis, and then formulating a smart collective outcome using the rubric of specific, measurable, achievable or attainable, realistic and time-bound. The next is to ensure that you are integrating relevant or existing plans or result frameworks to support your collective outcome. This is one of the critical things. Earlier, I mentioned that it is very unlikely that you are the first person or the first organization or the first group intending to do work within a space. And when you understand what has happened in the context of that space in the past, you now begin to know, oh, are there relevant policies or laws or frameworks? Are there past projects that have worked, that have been done that achieved a particular result that I can leverage to do my work? You don't have to reinvent the wheel with HDP. It's essentially to augment what is already on the ground and use that to our advantage. So here it's also pointing to understanding, are there relevant government frameworks or policies that are of benefit to the work that you're trying to do within a space? This is usually a point of reference for us, because the HDP, outside of calling for collaboration within actors, it's also calling for collaboration with those systems or those structures that are permanent and that support the work that we do. And government cannot be outside of that process. It's also looking at their systems, frameworks, templates that have worked in the past that you can adapt and replicate within the context of the project that you have. So what plans are those? Is there a policy? Is there a development plan? So I'll just come back to the base states. For the not the base state, the Northeast. So for the Northeast, through the Northeast Development Commission, there is a 5-year development plan that they expect different actors to key into. And it covers all of the major sectors from agriculture to health, to industrialization, and a number of things. If you understand what those different plans are, it's easy to key your work into that and make the achievement of everybody's goals easier, instead of coming up with something new or something outside the scope of what maybe government is trying to achieve or what development agencies are trying to achieve. Are there frameworks, are there M&E strategies that could be useful, that have worked in a similar context, that you can adapt in the projects that you are doing, just to be able to measure impact and understand what is on the ground? And this is also where you now set your targets and agree on the different indicators that you would use to measure the impact and the success of your initiative, your project, or your activity. This is also where we emphasize ensuring that there is accountability. And if we look back at the first step where we assign responsibility, we would always emphasize that in order to ensure that there's accountability, you must first assign responsibility so that you know who is responsible for what and who can be held accountable for particular things at the end of the day. The next step is to ensure that peace building perspectives or peace building and prevention perspectives are built into your collective outcome process. Peace, 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 peace. This is the key thing around the HDP. If there is no peace, we risk losing the gains or the progress of development of humanitarian assistance and aid in the long run. So how do we ensure that we're using this peace perspective in our programming? I'll give an example. You might think of it as, oh, how do we actually integrate peace into everything that we're doing? Let me give an example of maybe you have an outreach within a community, and your outreach is to disperse maybe food items because the need that has been identified is, or this community doesn't have access to a lot of food. We want to go in and provide food items. A simple activity like that can break down into a serious conflict, and we've seen this happen a lot of times. So you ask yourself, what is the best way for me to share these food items without causing a problem? What is the best way for me to carry out my activity without doing harm or causing conflict or causing tension within a community? And simply asking that question can transform the way you go about what you're doing. That's putting on a peace lens or using the peace perspective in this context. So just to run my example through to the end, you go into a community, you want to distribute food items, and at the end of the day, after distributing the items, there's a big fight that breaks out, lives are lost, the food items that you shared are destroyed. At the end of the day, I don't think the goal of that project has been achieved. It's been, the entire thing has fallen apart, and you've not been able to reach the people you intend. You've broken the trust that the community possibly has in you. And it's going to be very difficult for you to go back and replicate, even for your own safety and for the safety of the people that you are trying to intervene on their behalf. So simply asking, okay, how do we share this food without it causing conflict? You can decide to go door to door. Instead of having people gather in a space, you do your distribution door to door. That would ensure that this activity is peaceful. Or you have a system where certain days are for certain people, or just something innovative, something creative to ensure that there are no tensions and people actually receive the support of your initiative fully without any harm being done. And finally, this is also where you now decide how many actors should be included within the thematic outcome process and at what point would they work together. So the thing about the HDPN is this: you might be thinking, is it possible for humanitarian development and peace actors to work together at the same time? In reality, not really. It's best to determine who is doing what and when, and if they will be collaborating at different stages. What we mean here is sometimes you have to wait for humanitarian intervention to be completely over before you can start to discuss development to ensure that the development is coming at the right time, so programming at the right time. Sometimes it's important that humanitarian and peace actors work together, just with the example I gave earlier, just to ensure that this particular activity goes well and there is no breakdown of law and order, there is no conflict, or there is no loss of life and property before development actors now step in to do their work. It is always best to iron out the details as to what needs to be done and who will be working together at what stage to achieve it. And this can even come down to specific roles if we're talking about the Rotary clubs and the work that we do within the districts. So just before I move forward, and just to ask if there are any questions about the collective outcome process so far, and if we have an understanding of what it is. I see a question on comparative advantage is not displayed on the screen, please. Yes, so we don't have a special slide for comparative advantage. It's one of the core principles around how the HDPN is implemented and how we expect it to be operationalized. And as I shared earlier, it is essentially leveraging on your strengths. What are you good at? What have you been doing for a long time? What is that thing that is backed by evidence that we can call you and say, oh, this is the person, this is the expert in this field, this is the person that understands this. That is essentially what comparative advantage is. And we expect that different actors, stakeholders leverage this in doing their work so that we can achieve the impact that we're hoping to at the end of the day. I hope that clarifies. Thank you. Thank you so much, Gloria, for the question around who initiates coordination among actors in the field. Who takes the lead? Is it Rotary, NGOs, or government? So depending on the context that you find yourself in, it can be any of these actors. So what we usually advocate for is that regardless of what you are doing, the government should be in the know of it. They may not be willing to lead, but they should be willing to participate just to enable you ensure sustainability or whatever is being done. Depending on what this activity or project is, this is also where comparative advantage comes in. You have to ask yourself, is Rotary better at coordinating? Is the NGO better at coordinating, or is the government better at coordinating? Who has the comparative advantage based on this? Comparative advantage is measured based on what needs to be done and not in just a general overview of who we expect to lead an initiative. What are those different things that should happen for this project to be a success? And who is best at leading this component or this aspect? Usually, government is in a better position to coordinate, mostly because they have the structures in place, they often have the resources, and they have the systems that enable these things to be sustainable. But a lot of times they may not be willing to coordinate, they may just be willing to participate. So this is best determined on based on whose comparative advantage is on coordination. I hope this is helpful, Gloria. Thank you very much. Yes, I see another question, a comment. Sustainability is what will primarily determine the main actors. Yes, sustainability is always key. When you look at your stakeholders or the stakeholders that you want to bring into a process, it's not just for the immediate action that needs to be taken. It's also for what comes after, when your intervention comes to an end, because every intervention comes to an end. When it ends, what happens next? And when you take all of those things into consideration from the very point of formulation, it helps you bring in the right people to do what needs to be done. And usually, the right people in this instance would be a government agency or a government structure whose mandate it is possibly provide these services in the first place. And if you're involving them, you're not only helping them do their work, but you're also advancing your own work as well. Thank you for that. Great. All right. Seeing that we don't have any other questions or comments, permit me to move on to talking about implementing collective outcomes. So we've understood what it means to formulate and program around collective outcomes. We've also discussed the 5 steps to be able to formulate a collective outcome. So how do we actually now go about implementing it? The key thing here is ensuring that there is some sort of synergy in terms of coordination among the different stakeholders and actors. There is a coherence of what exactly needs to be done, and collaboration based on comparative advantage is being used. The first step with implementing collective outcomes is you also have to look inward at your structures and at the organizational culture that you have. What incentives are currently on ground that could push us closer towards humanitarian development and peace collaboration? Do we have existing structures on ground that will enable us to do this? And if the answer is no, how do we now promote or incentivize these things that would push us towards humanitarian development and peace collaboration within the structures that we find ourselves in? That is the first step. The second step is to strengthen the planning and implementation capacity at both national and subnational level for the HDPN. And while this doesn't primarily fall on, for example, the Rotary Club, one of the things that the HDP has done is currently doing is to ensure that government understands that this is critical in terms of sustained and sustainable development. So the National HDP Plan, the National Task Force, and the Durable Solutions Plan, and all of that, all of those are ensuring that there is an awareness and capacity and understanding and knowledge of the HDPN at these different levels. The next is to assess the suitability of the existing coordination mechanisms for achieving this collective outcome. And it goes back to the question that was just asked. Who is in the best position to lead or coordinate? What is the suitability of this existing coordination mechanism, and how does it help us achieve our collective outcome? Do we need to adjust, or do we need to create a new mechanism? For those of us who may be very familiar with the way the nonprofit sector works or the NGO space works, there are sectoral coordination meetings and thematic area coordination meetings. And particularly in the Northeast, if your organization or your group doesn't belong to some of these coordination frameworks, you are not allowed to implement because you'd be going out of what is expected. Those coordination meetings or those coordination groups gives you or gives everybody who is supposed to be involved in that process an idea of what is currently on ground and who needs to be doing what. So looking at the Rotary clubs here in Nigeria, what is the existing coordination mechanism, and can you actually leverage it towards collective outcome? Or do you need to tweak some things here and there just to ensure that you're able to achieve HDPN? The next is to put in place the appropriate joint information management capacity and systems. We are very aware that some of the things around the HDPN and ensuring that it's actually achievable would be around information management. Information, data, very, very sensitive. And if we are not intentional about collaboratively and jointly managing information at the beginning, it becomes a problem as we go along, because some data is sensitive, some information is sensitive. Not everybody can be privy to certain things, and not everybody wants to share certain information, maybe because of data privacy or just because of certain nuances here and there. But ultimately, when we share information, it becomes harder for other people to exploit the system and cause issues around maybe duplication of the same sort of information where certain people benefit more from the system. So one of the issues that we have within the nonprofit space or the NGO space would be that there is, and I do believe that they're working towards this, there is no centralized database for everybody who we expect to understand as either an IDP, a returnee, or somebody who is in need. And because of that, it is easy for certain people to exploit the system. And we now have duplications here and there where the same set of people are receiving aid from 4 different organizations and other people are still left behind. We're not decreasing the need. Instead, we are focusing our efforts on just a particular group of people who are exploiting the system. And if we jointly manage information in that setting, it will be easy to know who is at what stage and who is primarily in need of help. It will also help organizations and groups know that, okay, this sister or brother organization is targeting 1,000 people. How about we now go ahead and take another additional 1,000 and the impact spreads? But if we don't have the systems in place, how do we know what's currently on ground and how we can use that to have more impact at the end of the day? And finally, how do we establish relevant partnerships to ensure that we can accelerate the achievement of collective outcomes? As we go into day 3 tomorrow, we're going to talk a bit about business development with the HDP Nexus. Because one of the things we understand, and I said this yesterday, we need funding to do a lot of this work. The funds are important. You need good money to do good work. And there are certain partnerships that accelerate this. If we're not thinking about it from the onset, it's very difficult to achieve as we go along. So what are those partnerships that we need to put in place, even outside of the money conversation? What are the partnerships with governments that would be of benefit to the work that we do? Are there corporations, private sector actors? Are there community groups that we can partner with that would help us achieve HDPN more seamlessly and more flawlessly? This is also a key consideration in terms of implementing. And we'll be moving on to stakeholder engagement and collaborative programming in the HDP Nexus. And I also hope to touch a bit more on how to identify some of these crucial or key partners in terms of the work that we're doing. But very quickly, let's just check the chat. Okay, we don't have any comments in the chat so far. Any questions? Happy to take one or two before we proceed with the conversation on stakeholder engagement and collaborative planning. Thank you, Rotary and Sage. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for this opportunity once again. It's an eye-opening to a lot of us that have been on the field for this crucial engagement, crucial job. But my question here is just very simple here. When you have the government at the forefront, I want to believe we are speaking like Nigerians now. Like a lot of us here now, we have this issue with the government where they even set aside an SA on NGOs, they call it partners, SA on partners, where they decide how much money come in, how much money you spend, and how you do about your project and a lot of things. And a lot of NGOs are frowning at this and even disengaging from involvement because the need is to help and the need is to assist. In a situation like this, where the government doesn't pally you or give you that rightful opportunity to deliver your deliverables, what will you do? That is my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rotary and Sage. Like I shared earlier on, one of the things that we're particular about within the HDP Nexus is honesty. And I'll demonstrate how here. Unfortunately, because of the context that we find ourselves in, a lot of times some of these things are typically very difficult to achieve, maybe because of personal interest or because there's a lack of trust within the structures of the system. What we are trying to do is we're hoping to, or we are building ambassadors of the HDPN. In situations such as those, a lot of times it's to have certain people that you can leverage on who understand the system, who are part of the system, and who can influence the system to your benefit. And we are hoping that with this message of HDPN reaching more people, even through the Rotary Club, we are beginning to build allies and people within the system that can help us look away from some of those petty squabbles and looking at impact at the end of the day. It's, to be honest with you, there's no straight answer for that, but we are aware that these are some of the challenges on ground. But as we continue to preach this message of HDP, we're hoping that more people will see the need for collaboration over everything else and will begin to buy into this message and push for impact over everything. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's okay. Thank you.
Great. Happy to take one more question just before we move ahead. Okay, great. Thank you. So speaking on stakeholder engagement and collaborative programming within the HDP. When we look at operationalizing the HDP as a whole, and we start to look at stakeholder engagement and the likes, one of the things we often emphasize is we should first understand what the existing triggers on ground are, and if there is readiness for different actors to come into the space and implement for HDP. So what are the best entry points, which we discussed? Do you need to work within the existing projects that are on ground, or do you need to go back to the drawing board and start to formulate? And do you also understand what certain triggers within a particular context are in terms of a particular situation or the likes? So the first thing we often advocate for here is we need to first decide who is best placed to identify and convince stakeholders. Back to comparative advantage. Who is best placed to identify and convince stakeholders in the process or in the initiative or in the project that you have on ground? Whose comparative advantage is this? The next is, what are the existing coordinating structures and do they need to be strengthened? Do you need to go back to the drawing board and ensure that certain things are put in place just before you go into implementation, or bringing the stakeholders to the table? Are you ensuring that there is participation from the affected persons in your planning and decision-making processes? Oftentimes, what we find is you've done your planning and your design of your project and all of those key things in your beautiful office somewhere in Abuja, and it's only on the day of implementation that you now go into the community somewhere in Kuje or Gwaglada or Gwarimpa to support them. They've never seen you before then. They don't even understand what you're coming there to do. How can they own the process and how can they support you to achieve it? Those would be some of the questions we would ask. So are you ensuring that these people you want to do something for are involved in the planning and decision-making process from the onset? It also makes the work you do easier because they will point you in the right direction. They'll tell you, oh, this thing is possible because of this, or this thing is impossible because of this. And it would help you save resources, save time, and make better impact at the end of the day. The next is to determine the participants' comparative advantage for specific roles within the HDP Nexus in a transparent way. And this is just our way of asking each and every one of us to be honest as we program, what is your comparative advantage? Because you cannot do everything and you should not do everything, what is best for you to focus on? What can you achieve more easily or seamlessly? Next is to ensure that there is a common understanding of collective outcomes. This also speaks to, while we're preaching the message of HDPN as far and as widely as we can. The more people understand it, the easier it is for it to come into being or for it to exist. The easier it is for it to become second nature, especially for those of us who work within this humanitarian development and peace building space. If we go back to our clubs, or even for those of us who work within the nonprofit space, and we talk HDP to people who understand HDP, you will see that it's easy to get certain things done. So there needs to be a shared understanding, and there needs to be a common understanding of what this collective outcome is, or what collective outcomes are, to enable us achieve the goal of it. And finally, to maximize the participation of either international financing institutions, just such as the World Bank, in the HDPN process from the very onset. What the practice we've had in the past is usually a top to bottom approach in terms of donors telling you these are the areas that we want to fund, this is the available grant, and this is what we want you to use it for. And we are now advocating that that should not be the case anymore. Local actors, local NGOs, groups such as Rotary are the ones who interface more with the communities. We are the ones on ground. We are the ones that understand what these claims are. We should be the ones to be able to say, these are the key or crucial areas or critical areas that need to be focused on in the context of this community or this area that we find ourselves in. Now, we want you to help provide funding to do this. A lot of times, this is even possible with ongoing projects or even existing funding where you can provide justification for doing certain things. Because change is the only constant thing, especially in a space such as ours, we have to be willing to adapt very quickly. And if you set that tone very early on with some of these funders, it makes it easy for work to progress. So bringing them into the process as critical stakeholders is also very, very important. how do you ensure that some of these big funders are part of the conversations when you're doing your joint analysis, you're doing your planning, just so they see how we arrive at certain things, and possibly they can support with additional funding or even go over and beyond to help us achieve some of these goals. When we convene these stakeholders or actors, it's very important that we are doing it with a sense of intentionality and a sense of purpose at the end of the day. While we're bringing them to the table, what responsibility are we assigning to them? What do we want them to be accountable for? What do we want them to focus on? What do we want them to lead? It's very important that each of these things are considered from the very onset, just so you're able to bring the right people to the table to have this conversation. If I wanted to program around healthcare and my table was full of only teachers, I can tell you that at the end of the day, we're not going to have anything tangible or impactful to do anything in health, because that is not the area of expertise or the comparative advantage of teachers. So we need to ensure that we're bringing the right people to the table to have these conversations and to help us push impact at the end of the day. Moving on to joint analysis. We had mentioned that joint analysis is one of the key things, the first steps in the HDPN process, where you form your thematic outcome groups in formulating a collective outcome. And your joint analysis is essentially a collaborative process where the different partners with complementary areas of expertise and responsibilities try to make sense of certain information within a given context. And you're also expected to agree on the methodology to use to gather this information, to gather this data. When conducting joint analysis within the HDPN process, it's first of all about identifying and understanding the drivers and root causes of the problem or the situation on ground, as well as assessing the risks, the needs, and the vulnerabilities, and their the impact it will have in the long run. So the future consequences of not addressing some of those things at this point in time. So the joint analysis, beyond just gathering data, it's also about understanding what this data is speaking to. What are the priority areas? What are the key things? What are the potential risks if certain things are not addressed on time? And it will help the group or the organization or whoever is working towards a collective outcome to first develop an informed strategy and to ensure that its intervention putting a band-aid over a problem, but actually solving it and addressing it towards sustainable peace, development, and ensuring that we are not relapsing into another crisis or another conflict. When we carry out joint analysis, the first is to agree on a conceptual framework. What is the methodology that will be used? And who, of course, who is going to lead in this process? The next is to assemble the right team of analysts to make sure that you're not coming out with data that is not going to be useful to you at the end of the day. The next is also to determine the scope of the context that you're going to find yourself working in. Again, we're talking about area-based approach. You can't solve all the problems in Nigeria, and even if you intended to, the problems differ from place to place. So what is the context of the scope of work? Is it local? Is it national? Is it regional? Or is it, domiciled within a small community in a particular place? The next is also to identify and agree on the different data sources that will be analyzed, just so you know the impact you're looking to make at the end of the day. And finally, it is to prepare your plan for data collection and analysis. I know that we're not strangers to doing data collection, focus group discussions, doing interviews with people. Where the HDP takes it a step further is, instead of one body or one person or one group that doesn't have input or different perspectives from the different pillars going to carry out this activity, we're collaborating from the very onset to ensure that we're incorporating all the different perspectives and all the critical things that need to form our collective outcome or the impact we're intending to have at the end of the day. So there are 3 stages in the joint analysis framework. And the first is your planning and coordination and preparation phase, where you essentially bring the key actors together for your joint analysis, make sure everybody understands what you're trying to achieve, agree on the different indicators, and of course, develop the plan for the joint analysis. The next is the assessment stage, where you do go into the field, gather the data, make sense of it, find your results, prioritize certain areas, and ensure that it's aligned with what you're hoping to achieve. And finally, reconvening, bringing all of these different actors back into the space, sharing the outcome of these results, and now charting a path forward in terms of what needs to be done. So this is your reconvening is now what will birth whatever proposal or project or initiative that you end up doing for that community. And just a point to note, this just came to mind. With joint analysis, and I'm sure we've noticed that it takes a bit of a different form from the usual way that things have been done within the space. You are no longer going to a community with a preconceived notion as to what their challenges are. Instead, you're going into that space with an open mind to hear what exactly it is that is on ground. Even if you want to carry out a particular intervention, we always advise that you first go and do a consultation with the community or with this group that you want to support to understand from them what the challenges are. Just with the example that Dr. Mubarak gave yesterday, their group was asked to leave the community because it's not peace that they were looking for. They were looking for food. So imagine you find yourself in a similar situation. It might even be dangerous to you. It is best to hear from them. I think the phrase is to hear from the horse's mouth. What are the issues that you are experiencing here? They know where it hurts. They understand where the pain is in the shoe that they are wearing, and nobody else can explain it more than them. And if you're not involving them in your process of design to understand from them first what needs to be done, a lot of times your intervention may not be effective. Great. So we've come to a very interesting part of the training. Great. So we've come to an interesting part of the training. And while we're hoping to do this, I think we'll just open it as a plenary discussion. I'd like to really hear from the House in terms of how we now see the HDPN being applied to some of the work that we do as clubs, some of the real projects that we've been carrying out. Is there something that has popped into your mind in terms of maybe we should have done this way, or maybe this approach was better, or maybe this was a critical stakeholder that we should have involved in this process in supporting this community or in carrying out this initiative? I'd just like to open the floor for conversation, and I'd like us to discuss how some of the projects that we're doing within the Rotary can begin to integrate the HDP principles into ensuring that we have impact at the end of the day. I believe we can take a 20-minute break in line with that and convene at exactly 12:43, just to give us time to stretch our legs, grab maybe a glass of water, enjoy a bit of sunshine if it's not raining, and come back and discuss how we start to see the HDPN in the context of the Rotary. Thank you.
On the contrary, Madam V, if we do it like that, Rotarians will go from there. I think the conversation could hold on the platform, and then we can take individual interventions, learn from the process, and then close.
Okay,
Please.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that as well. So it just means we'll be closing a bit earlier. Great, thank you, Dr. Pietro. Okay, so the floor is open for questions and comments around the HDPN and how we can start to see some of its application within the work we're doing within the Rotary clubs. Thank you.
Club presidents in the house, this is your time. District leaders, please jump in. Okay, Rotary Bichoku, please, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, my able chairman. Thank you, Vanessa, for a beautiful presentation going on so far. I just have a concern on this project we are talking about, especially on trust. You know, you talk about honesty, and when it's broken, the intervention might actually not get to where we really want it to, or the people that want it to make such impact on. You see, I have, let me set an example here. I have a friend who their own organization actually went for an intervention after all their need assessment they made on such intervention, and then by the time they get to this place, they notice that the things they came with for that particular intervention were being hijacked by the same community leaders. So the people who are meant to get those interventions were sidelined. And then they found out it was the families of such people, friends who were called from behind to receive those items. So in this case, now you see the honesty there, the people who are actually meant to get these things, we are not impacted on. So at this point, how do we handle such in going forward? How do we handle situations like this? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for that question. And I'm glad that it's being asked so openly, especially since we're trying to propagate honesty within the work that we do. One of the first things I would say in that instance is if the organization had done an initial assessment or had a conversation with people within the community, I believe that they would have found out that this is probably the usual practice when certain items come into a space. It's not uncommon that community leaders divert some of these things. And one of the key things, and if it has never happened before, and that was the first time it was happening, it's a learning point or a learning curve for the organization to know that you do not hand off these items to the community leader anymore when you want to carry out an intervention. Instead, you probably do a door-to-door distribution, or you have a system or a roster for different people, or you have the different leaders for the different demographics within the community as also a part of the process, just so that somebody doesn't throw their weight around and jeopardize what it is that is being done. The truth is, when we're dealing with human beings, anything can happen, but the onus is on us to have strong systems and structures in place so that people do not exploit the good work that we're intending to carry out. So I would just say that for anybody who finds themselves in a situation like that, once is enough times for something like that to happen. And it's also important that the organization or the group in question buckles up and make sure that they find innovative approaches to carrying out some of these things. When the community sees that there's an intention, an honest intention behind what you're also doing, those people start to shape up and sit up. And of course, you have systems in place that don't allow them exploit it. It just makes you more intentional about what you're doing. I hope this is helpful, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Gloria, I see your hand up. Please go ahead. Hello, Gloria. Yes, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, colleagues. And Vanessa, thank you so much for your interventions. Honestly, it's been nice being here. I'm listening to you and a whole lot more. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, let me just quickly say something about one of the slides that you shared at the beginning of your presentation, where you talked about those, how to go about getting your assignments done or your project done and then engaging government. And some of the projects that I work on, before we begin, we get the approval of the state governments to work in the states. And once we call it a mandate, once you get that mandate, then you can carry out projects across the state and across local governments and across, depending on the context you're working with. So that's, that mandate is really, really helpful. And wherever you go and you tell people that you have the mandate of government to work in this, on this project, in this sector, in this space, there is always support that comes with it. So I just want to encourage Rotarians that let's look at working with government not from the negative. I know that in some states, like in Borno, it was really an issue because a lot of NGOs left due to some government interference and the demands that they make. But when we come from also getting their approval to do certain things, it solves our problem. And being Rotarians, that name already gives us a very strong trust base to work in communities, which I think we should continue to build on and not take for granted and not ruin also with conduct or with comments and so on and so forth. In terms of applying the HDP Nexus in the work that we do, we are humanitarians first and foremost. Our work is to be in communities and to support our communities to be better, to get the things that they need. Is it in health? Is it in the environment? Is it in peacemaking? Which happens to be Rotary's very first core mandate. So in everything that we do, we have to, this will really resonate in all our activities. That you look at, as Rotarians let's say in JOS, the Plateau Peacebuilding Agency is there. Search for Common Ground is there. Next Year is there. Tier Fund is there. Crudan is there. How do we work with all of these groups to ensure that people are okay? There are IDP camps scattered all over the place in Bokos, in Riom. So how do we get into these spaces, working with these groups, livelihood organizations that helps us to provide those things that Rotary is known for, that where people see the will, Rotarians are working to ensure that young girls in these camps get the pads that they need, that children are taught certain lessons so they don't miss out in school, that women are provided with the basics that they need. Is it farm implements? Is it household items? Is it training? Is it skills? So I see this HDP Nexus really helping us to work across board. There are times that as Rotarians, when we go to do livelihoods or we go to provide certain things, we just want to be on our own. It is my club that is doing it. It is my district that is doing it. So we tend to work in a silo. We're planning World Polio Day, and we want to see it as a Rotary thing. It is our activity. But now you are telling us that, look, there are a whole lot more people within the space that we can work with to do a whole lot more. So I see this as an avenue for us to do more, to impact more, to provide more, to reach out more. And you have really, really helped not just my work as a Rotarian, but my work within the peace building space to see that collaboration is everything. And when we have a collective result at the end of the day, everybody is happy. Above all, the communities that we are serving are happy and are okay. So I thank you very much. I'll stop at, I'll stop here. Thank you. Thank you, Pietro.
Thank you very much, Gloria. That you just summed up, the entirety of what the HDPN is advocating for so beautifully. And we're glad that this message of collaboration over everything else is resonating with everyone on the call. This is what we want to see. So many people are doing so many things, and if we don't coordinate and collaborate, we'll just be doing different things that don't lead to any impact or any outcome at the end of the day. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. I see yes, Mr. Pafo, your hand is up again. Please go ahead.
Yes, please. I just want to make a little input on what Dr. Gloria just said. Thank you for that beautiful rendition, Gloria. But I just want to say that some coming to mandate, some places might, some states actually have their own different way of doing things. What's applicable in my state might actually be different from another state. Like the state where I stay, I noticed that if most times you come for projects like this and then you are telling the people you have the mandate of the government, of course you have to take the government along for the projects you want to run. But most times I noticed that when you go to these people projecting the government first before the Rotarians, the people expect more from you. Like the state where I come from, they expect more from you. And most times when you're intervention didn't get round. Rotarians will do things according to their strength or their power of contributions within their club and individual efforts. And then you are telling them, okay, you have the mandate of the government to come. The people from that local government already are seeing it that maybe government has given you enough, and they are bringing a little from what the government has given, which might, endanger you and your team that is there for such for that particular intervention. So most cases, what we do is we go to these places, just project Rotary. This is Rotary, is an organization on its own that we are just come here for this intervention for you people, and you just do what you are there for, and then you leave. Because most times when you project the government, they see that a big entity is supporting you with their project or with money or food, and then you're giving them a little thing. This might as well, put you and your team at risk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Apafo. Yeah, you're very right. These are some of the nuances that exist on the ground. Once we say governments, expectations are a bit more heightened. I just like to say that one of the key things I realized from what you've said is in the way that the club has been carrying out its activities, and using your instance, you go in to do an intervention one-off, and you don't want to project a certain impression that you're getting constant support from the government, and you're there to do more than what you can. I would say that this is also where we advocate for involving these people in the process from the onset, sharing with them exactly what it is you're trying to do. You can even start to access some of the enablers or some of the champions within the community or influencers within the community who will be able to advance the cause of what you're trying to achieve. It's not easy, I will admit, and I will be honest about it. It's not easy, it's difficult, especially where a lot of people have become so aid dependent in Nigeria. But the best we can always do in that situation is to be clear with what we are able to do, who we are, and how we need their support. It's also one of the reasons why we're emphasizing, community-led development initiatives. So another aspect of the trainings that we do from the academy is to sensitize communities in terms of what is possible and their role in ensuring that development reaches them as well. So we're hoping that working from both sides of the spectrum, one day we can finally come to a space where everybody knows what's really feasible and attainable, and we do not expect more from those who are already giving their very best. Also, you had mentioned that a lot of the interventions are carried out with just donations from the Rotary Club members, and this is probably the practice that you've had on ground over a period of time. it is possible to start to look at additional unconventional means of funding some of the things that we do, just as Gloria had shared earlier. There are so many other people doing work within the context that you find yourself. And if Rotary, as a humanitarian organization, is intending to do, immediate relief, immediate support, it might be easier to start to partner with the established organizations or nonprofits, and even governments doing similar work, just to ensure that you're collaborating and combining resources and efforts to do more at the stage you find yourself. It's not easy. It's a lot of work. But if we start today, we will be far off from where we are in another couple of years. Thank you so much for sharing, and that's a very big eye opener for us as well. Thank you. I do have a question in the comments. Why is it that only some set of people only benefit from government poverty alleviation programs in Nigeria? I'm not sure I have all the answers to that, but I would just attempt to say that I think it's also a needs sort of thing. A lot of times, and you see this even with international funding and support goes to where it is most apparently needed. So for example, take when COVID-19 became a big deal in 2019, 2020. A lot of funders dropped everything they were doing and started funding health-based projects. So funding and support will always respond to the trends on ground or to what is happening. And unfortunately, if there is a particular need within a community and nobody's amplifying that this need exists, everybody is going to act as business should go on as usual, and they will not access the resources that they need. The truth is, while we also involve government in some of these conversations, because local governments are there to see what the larger state government or federal governments cannot see. And if they're also not doing their work and they are not advocating and insisting and carrying out certain responsibilities, then aid and support will not get to those who deserve it the most. I hope this is helpful, Mr. Christopher. Yes, I see a mic on. Please go ahead, Joseph.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. My name is Joseph Kadafu from Rotary Club of Maiduguri. In addition to what you have all said in regard to the mandate from the government towards approach to serve the humanity, I think one primary thing after the mandate from the government is the proper community entry. When you have a good community entry, I think from there you will have your way paved to serve the community at which you are there to serve better without rejection easily. Because at that very point, you must have bring all the stakeholders on deck to discuss with them why you are there, your purpose of being there, and to what extent you think you can serve. Not necessarily showing them that you are from the government, not necessarily telling them that the government has done this for you. At the community level, they will not understand the word of the government easily for you. But your presence only speaks to them what will they get from you, to what extent can you help them out, what support can they get from you. So basically, when we go to communities for an intervention, it is not necessary we should begin to tell them that we have approval from the government, but we should be able to advocate to the stakeholders of that very community to tell them our purpose of being there. That is, I think for now, that is what I can add. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution, Joseph. Yes, you're very right. You know, entry matters, and determining how best to interface, ensuring that you're involving all the critical people within the community who can help you advance your mandate or the work that you're trying to do. It's very critical, and it would help avoid some of those misconceptions that usually come up when we start to mention some of the heavy hitters that might be funding what we're doing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you.
Okay, allow me to jump in and address a few issues, probably re-emphasize or unblur as the case may be. I'm so glad about this conversation. These are the things, especially the concerns raised by Mr. Okafor, Rotary and Okafor, about Rotary and Rotarians opting to do our things ourselves. That has been the traditional way of doing things, and that is the whole essence of introducing this HDPN approach, so that we start having a paradigm shift from that traditional way of doing things. Be more collaborative, not just within clubs, but outside of clubs. If you look at the Rotary Action Group for Peace in particular, the Nigerian chapter in reference here, you would see our interventions are never done as a single entity. Either we are partnering with one government agency or the other. And even recently, just last week, we also tied up a very huge collaboration with the government. Having said that as well, it's not necessary for you to start brandishing that at the grassroots level. Keep in mind that the level of comprehension at that level is very, very tricky. And what they will understand is just Naira and Kobo. And sometimes this government partnership doesn't easily translate to liquid cash. Rather, it's usually technical support or infrastructure, like Madam Vanessa have emphasized in terms of sustainability. So you don't need to have that conversation. You being there, your portfolio of partners is different. You being there in person, face what you came for, engage with key stakeholders, tell them the advantage of the intervention you're introducing. And, you know, you don't need to communicate other things. You need to manage expectation. So nobody is expecting Rotary to tar their road or provide electricity or build markets or do one white elephant project or the other. So additionally as well, someone mentioned partnership. I think that was our Rotary leader, Rotary Gloria Thomas, you know, cultivating some of these established NGOs, including Action Aid, is one of our approach. And I'm happy to inform you that soon we will be also tying that relationship with Action Aid so that we can enhance what Rotary is doing and have more, you know, textbook approaches to copy from or really collaborate to enhance what we are doing. So the whole essence of this training is for us to build our capacity so that we know at every level in the state we have members of the Action Group for Peace Nigeria chapter that are well informed, that are on board with what we are doing and understands our approaches. Thank you very much. I thought I should emphasize some of this and really make it more clear to us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pierce. Yes, as that helps.
Okay, we need more interventions. Rotarians from other districts, I've heard from 9127. I've heard the voice of 9126. 9112, 9111, 9141. Rotarian Bimina, are you with us? The National Legal Advisor, please, how does the HDPN approach tie into the Rotary approach, and what commitments or pledges are we making here going forward in terms of comparative advantage, collaboration, etc.?
Good afternoon, Chair. Thanks, our facilitator. It's a great time well spent on this section and this connects. And it's just a way of re-emphasizing. I think most of the projects Rotary values most is those ones that are done out of collaboration, because you get more value from collaboration. You get more people hands-on projects. It creates more impact, and it gives the world outside the impression or the picture to say this is what is done in the right direction, and then more hands. In fact, it creates room for more collaboration in Rotary activities. You cannot compare what you do as an individual to what you do as a group or what you do in collaboration with other entities, either Rotary clubs or other organizations. You cannot compare it. The impact is much more. So if we decide to go solo, we are just doing ourselves more harm than good. It's our loss. There's nothing wrong in collaborating, just to go on with the principles that we are being trained on, so that we go about it with the right approach. And I'm sure in our own little ways, the collaborations will be more impactful in the society. Thank you.
Thank you. 9142 Rotarian Nobudu. Rotarians in 9142 want to hear your voice. (9112) State Peace Coordinator.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
PAG Olushola Okola, 9142 Rotary Club of Calabar. This training is actually very timely because definitely going to expand the scope of work that is being done. The fear being expressed about maybe our projects being taken as government projects and the people not being friendly. I think if we do our needs assessment properly before undertaking, that means the community identified the project, accepted it as needed, and they know that we are the one doing it. All we need to do is to obtain government approval, and we specify that what we have is approval, not funding. There will be no problem. So going forward, I think this collaboration approach will enable us to do more and bigger projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my PAG. So excellently submitted. Rotary Anolori District 9112. Any intervention on behalf of your district?
Yes, we are actually working on something, but we'll conclude shortly and then I'll get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. We trust it will be HDPN compliant.
Yes.
Okay. Madam Vanessa, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pietro. I do have a comment in the chat, and I just wanted to give Dr. Izzy Adeniran just an opportunity to share. I think it would be of benefit to the larger house, just as we can also offer insights onto how we can tackle some of these issues. So Dr. Adeniran, if you're over to you, please. I saw your comments and I'd just like you to share with the larger house.
Okay, thank you very much. A club in Abeokuta years back wanted to build a toilet and approached the local government, and it was approved. So they got some of the materials needed, like sand, cement, etc. And on the day they were supposed to start, the president was invited by the local government and gave them a check that your sand will be this amount, the cement will be this amount, and gave them the check, and that was the end. So I just felt like for that club, in that same Rotary year, to approach that same local government for any other projects would be by the grace of God. So I just want to know how Rotary Club can actually avoid things like this.
Okay,
Thank
let
you so
me
much.
probe further. my Rotarian, I
Go
think this is
ahead.
a Rotary concern. We'll need you to clarify, was it a global grant or a district grant, or the
No,
club mobilized resources on their own?
club project. Club.
Okay. So if I get you clearly, the club didn't implement the project and they left with the money.
They didn't allow them to finish it. They just told them the local government will take over and build it.
So more like they refunded the club's resources and asked the club to abandon the project.
Yeah, the local government took it over on their own.
Okay.
It was
Was
later
there a
built
mismanagement
by
of
the local
relationship
government.
along the line? What led to the refund or something?
Nothing. They had no issue because they had the letter with them. It might be an internal issue with the local government. I don't want to really go into that. You know, politics.
Yes.
Aha.
Okay, let me yield the floor to PDT Olagunju to intervene. My capacity Rotary leader.
Good afternoon, everyone on the call. I just want to use my experience to discuss this matter on ground. Just yesterday, we were at the Ministry of Health to meet with the commissioner. And she was telling us something that Rotary has been doing wrongly. Again, it has to do with politics anyway. And most times we deal with agencies under the ministry without connecting with the commissioner. So sometimes the agencies are running some of these programs with us. The political head of that ministry is not in the know. And then the situation where there's politics amongst them, who is more superior and the rest of it, it creates conflict. So most times the approvals we get from local governments, even though to some extent they say local governments are now autonomous, I think it is to an extent, and it's a recent thing. In doing things like this, I think we need to take it beyond the local government. Most probably go to the Ministry for Local Government and Chieftaincy, whatever, get the commissioner in the picture, and let the authorization come from that, the ministry down to the local government, and from there, they are aware. So such kind of thing will not happen. I get it clearly when he mentioned that they just issued them check. They refunded their money and said they don't want them. I don't see where anybody will say no to a gift if there are no other political undertone. And it's simply because they feel they are in charge, and then maybe they feel slighted that why should they think that they don't have the capacity to do all of this. So I think sometimes we should be taking our requests to the ministries, particularly when we're dealing with government, to the ministries, and get the ministry to authorize the agency or the local government that we want to work with to now give the authorization to those ones who will now in turn give approval or the space for us to carry out the project. If we do some of this if we do things in this way, it will help us avoiding this kind of problems. This thing actually came up sometimes ago, even before the experience I had yesterday. Sometimes ago, again, wanted to do a project at one local government, and then we had to go to the Ministry of Health. Actually, it was a primary health care that wanted to renovate in the village. So we had to write a letter to the commissioner. The commissioner wrote to the local government chairman, who now mandated the works HOD and the health HOD to take us to the facility, and then we're giving due and appropriate approval. Nobody else can stop us from that. So I think we should take a cue from that to work from the top to the bottom. Thank you very much. My experience I want to share. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think PZC said he wants to add to that. My PZC.
Thank you so much. This discussion, thank God, is coming this rightful time. We are in a training and it's coming this way. We are coming in from different perspectives, different states and different observations and things that we've encountered in the past, the way forward using the HDP Nexus. You see, like some states or some region in this country, nobody knows how they even label Rotary in the first place. Some of us have face-to-face attack on Rotary and the name Rotary and its acceptability. Come with a project that, like we have heard, that a project cannot be rejected or something like that. Often at times we have seen where projects level playing ground is not even provided for you. Let me give you an example. In the past, we had wanted to put an incinerator, a public incinerator in a particular place. We need to apply for the land that we have to use maybe a cabin to put there and maybe do a construction there. But as I'm speaking with you today, the approval has never come. You know why? Because it's a Rotary project. And let us make our way back to understanding that how come we have been rejecting polio in the first place up to this very particular moment? Is it not a good thing? Remember that it was a pharmacist, a learned pharmacist from Ibiza area, that came out openly and started preaching against the polio vaccine. That it makes it affects the potency, it reduces the production of children, especially in the north. They are targeting and the rest of it there. So when anything is coming in that way, and you have a tag, as far as I'm concerned, from where I'm coming from, I'm speaking from my own zone. I don't know what is obtainable in other zone. I don't know what is obtainable in other states, but I'm specific about my own. And that was why I said earlier, that time that you can now see, you make a proposal on a particular project, and somebody will dribble you here and they come tomorrow, and eventually the dream of that club is even dead on arrival. So there are some of these things that happens. So the way we have been doing it, like I had my state peace coordinator say something there, because that was our observation in our last project that we did. You go for inspection, you engage all that it takes, you everybody that is engaged. On arrival, they hijack all these things. What will you do? You carry police, carry law enforcement agency to secure all these things. Who are supposed to protect all these things? Is it not the community you want to assist? Are they not the one that are supposed to do all these things? Even if you follow the due process the way it's supposed to be from A to Z, engaging everything the way it's supposed to be, honestly speaking, you will not find it funny what will happen. Another encounter we had in my own state was we went to the market to deliver some items there, and putting government involved and whatever, they accuse us that what the government gave us was not what we are giving them. We are giving them what we have based on our capacity, based on the way we feel. We just have to do a project that aligns with the ideas of Rotary. But along the line, in fact, we have to run away with our cars because we started receiving stoning. So in a situation like that, what will you do? You stay there and engage government, and the government is not even there to protect you. And finally, sir, up to this very moment, in terms of visibility, in terms of whatever thing we have done, I don't think we have received any letter of commendation in the state where I come from, based on whatever thing we have been giving them. Rotary so far. Is it borehole? Is it whatever? Is it school books? Is it a desk? Is it whatever? I can tell you, Rotary has not gotten any official letter commending you that, hey, thank God you people have been able to do this wonderful project. We are benefiting from it and the rest of it from A to Z. So it depends on where we are coming from, the angle we are. Some of these Nexus approach, we can use them, but we just have to be very careful with the areas we are and with the way we operate on it. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much, my PZC. These are very germane experiences from the field that you won't see in any textbook. Well, let's not drag this matter. I think Rotarians on the call, we have these experiences and we know the undertones, perceptions, and reasons for some of them. But let's not get into that. And it's our duty with this new knowledge that we have to try to now see how we can better engage, better sensitize, and to achieve more improved results. Madam Vanessa, please, over to you, ma.
Thank
you, Dr. Pietro. I'm enjoying the conversation and, getting the different perspectives. The HDPN is also about, learning from each other and the experiences that we're having in our different contexts. Ultimately, we have to be willing to, walk around some of these issues that we find. I'm really encouraged by seeing in the chat, I saw someone mention that advocacy is also very critical, towards advancing the acceptability of the Rotary. Getting more people to know what you do and what your mandate is would definitely go a long way in advancing, the mission. Unfortunately, the nuances that we have here are, a bit tricky, but it doesn't diminish the good work that the Rotary is doing, and we're looking forward to seeing how we can amplify it on a larger stage. Thank you so much, everyone who has contributed, in the chats, taking the mic. The discussion has been very, very enriching, and I know that everyone is taking a thing or two away, even beyond the training. Thank you so much. At this point, although we're supposed to go on a break, I think it's great that we've been able to have this plenary conversation. And as we wrap up for today's session ahead of tomorrow, we just open up the floor one more time for any final comments from the 1 or 2 people as we aim to close at 1:15 this afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. So any questions, any unanswered questions on the HDPN, any comments? And just as we move to wrap up, tomorrow's training will start at the normal time 11. However, we'll be aiming to finish just slightly before 1, so we can observe the Jummah prayers and ensure that everybody has the rest of their Friday to themselves. So just as we wrap up, and tomorrow we'll be continuing the conversation and tidying up the details around the HDP Nexus. And for anyone who is interested in interacting with the course in full, typically we run a 5-day training program in collaboration with the different universities. Currently, there's a cohort going on that will be going on in Kefi next week. Although those applications have closed, maybe what we'll do is we'll provide the registration link to Dr. Pietro for anybody else who is interested in participating in the fuller conversation. So you can also network with some of the other key actors within the space and grow the impact of the work that you're doing within the clubs. Thank you, everyone. So just any questions, any comments as we wrap up?
Okay, in the absence of any hands on the call, I want to jump in and especially thank you once again, Madam Vanessa, for your enlightenment. It's been very enriching, and I'm sure that Rotarians are very excited. I can only imagine what Cohort 2 would look like when the gains and knowledge about this Cohort 1 goes out. So be rest assured we'll be disturbing you. I'm glad that you've accommodated us, Action Aid as well. We want to thank them specially. As we look forward to the last training tomorrow, I want to encourage those on the call not to forget to attend. The time is 11 a.m. And remember, we usually take screenshots at interval to monitor attendance. That has been our usual practice, and we have not also forgotten or failed to do that in this instance. So please log in, remain true to the call, attend to the post-training surveys, also attend your test. Our programs, we actually enjoy it when people fail. So I can encourage you to be complacent. We'll gladly fail you. So please, and mind you that those that take the Cohort 1, this Cohort 1 now won't be participating in any cohort in the nearest future till we have a satisfactory round of trained Rotarians. So please prioritize this and take it serious, and most importantly, bag your certificates to show that you are well informed about the HDPN. Beyond the certification, please, we encourage you to put it into practice at the club level, at district level, at other programs. Even in your personal business activities and office places. Collaboration is key, engagement is key. We thank Madam Vanessa once again for sharing knowledge. We thank the Action Aid Nigeria. We can't thank them enough because we are the only group that they've given this privilege, and we know how much we pushed and solicited. And especially once again, I thank Vanessa for making this happen. So on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Rotary Action Group for Peace Nigeria chapter, we say a big thank you to the HDP Nexus team. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And see you again tomorrow. Have a good afternoon. Thanks, Dr. Pietro.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye,
Bye, everyone.
Bye. See you
Have a
tomorrow.
good day.
Everyone, goodbye,
everyone.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. It was a good one. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Having everyone here.
Have a good afternoon, everyone.